Good evening, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day to those of you who are celebrating. It is Heart Month, so we're going to give ourselves some love by talking about whole grains and some of their heart health benefits. But before we get started, I wanted to go through a couple housekeeping things for us. So you should be seeing on your screen here a view of Teams. So this is the platform that we're using tonight. And I know several folks asked questions about turning on closed captions so that you have text on the screen while I'm talking. This image on your screen will show you how to do that. So at the top of your screen, there's three little dots and it says more underneath that. You click on that. You get a drop-down menu. There's an area that says language and speech. Click on that and then click on turn on live captions and you should see text populating on your screen right away. I also want to remind folks that everybody is muted and your cameras are turned off, and that is purely because we are recording this class and we want to make it a clean recording so folks who watch this in the future, yourselves included, can have a nice recording to go back and view. So we still want you to be able to participate and ask questions. We want this to be an engaging class. So we do have the Q&A function available for you, which is at the top left of your menu icons on the top of your team screen. You can type in a chat there, and then I've got my colleague Laura Ritter here who's going to be monitoring that chat, and she'll answer questions for you. This Q&A function is really for questions that are relevant to the content in tonight's class. If you have a question about other things like our lifestyle medicine programs or something that's really specific to you and your health conditions, send us an email at lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org. And we will respond there. And if your question requires more than a couple sentence response, you think, consider signing up for a one-on-one consult with us, and we'll make sure to answer your questions there. If you are joining us from an iPhone or an iPad, unfortunately, this Q&A function will not be available to you. I'm really sorry about that. But you can still email us questions at that lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org email address, and we'll respond. I would ask you, though, to write down your question and hold sending off that email to the end of the class because we may answer it, and I would hate for you to send an unnecessary email. So hold on to those questions if you're on the iPhone or iPad, and then shoot us an email at the end of class. All right, so who is this person who's talking to you? I'm Kelly Wilson. I am a registered dietitian nutritionist with the Lifestyle Medicine Department here at Trinity Health Ann Arbor. For those of you who aren't familiar with lifestyle medicine, it is a medical subspecialty that focuses on disease treatment, prevention, reversal, and whole person health through 6 key pillars. The main pillar that we're focusing on tonight in this class is a whole food, plant-forward dietary pattern. The other pillars include daily movement, positive social connection and relationships, stress management, restorative sleep, and avoiding risky substances. So in our lifestyle medicine department, we work with our patients in each of those 6 pillars through group classes, one-on-one appointments, and virtual education like this. Right. I have a background in organic agriculture and have done some culinary training as well, particularly around culinary genomics, which is just the art and science of how food influences our genes. And I'm really excited to be teaching these classes because I think everybody can cook. I want people to feel empowered in their kitchen and to love the food that they're eating and nourishing their bodies with. And I hope that you feel that inspiration by the end of tonight's class and the other classes in this series. We may all be at different parts in our journey in the kitchen, and that's totally okay. This class is for everybody, whether you're a seasoned pro in the kitchen or you're just starting out and learning the basics of what kind of knives you should have. I want to remind you that recipes are suggestions. So if we present a recipe and there's an ingredient that is either not available to you in your grocery store or because of your budget, or is something that you don't have a taste yet for, you can swap and you can ask us what we might want to swap in. If you have a question about ingredient, always happy to talk through that. And if this whole plant forward way of eating is a new concept for you and you're just dipping your toes in, consider starting with things that are familiar to you and adapting those recipes to add some more of the foods that we're going to be talking about in this series. Okay, and I'll talk through that in some of the recipes throughout this class and our future classes as well. And then be kind to yourself in this process and remember that change takes time. And this is a practice, right? So practice self-compassion, be patient, and be persistent with giving yourself the opportunity to try these foods that we talk about in this class. This is our class schedule, just so you are aware of kind of where we're going throughout the year. You can certainly take these classes as a one-off if there's just one topic that you're particularly interested in, but we do also build knowledge and content throughout the year. So the classes do kind of build off of each other. So you would get the most out of attending each class, but you're still going to get good information if you're only able to attend one. And a reminder, we do record all of these classes and you'll get the recording via email within a week of the class being over. So if you can't attend one of these classes, you can always watch the recording. So tonight, we are talking about whole grains, and we're going to talk about what they are, what their benefits are, how to identify them when you're at the grocery store. We're going to do a little show and tell, which I'm actually showing already on my screen here, so don't look too closely. We'll get into that in a second, and then we're going to go through 3 recipes. And before we do that, just want to remind everybody that this class focuses on general health. So I will use some ingredients like olive oil and salt that are perfectly healthy for healthy individuals to consume. But if you have certain chronic health conditions, they may be ingredients that you want to take out. And I'll talk through some swaps and options as we go through the recipes. And if you have a chronic health condition or another medical condition that you're managing right now, please speak with your physician and your registered dietitian before making any sweeping dietary or lifestyle changes to make sure that those changes align with your care plan. All right, whole grains, what are they? This image, I think, makes it pretty simple to understand what a whole grain is. A grain is a seed that's part of a grass plant, and grains are considered whole when they've got all 3 of the components that you can see on the left-hand side of your screen here. So those 3 components are the bran, which is the hard kind of outer coat of the grain, and it's full of fiber and B vitamins. And then we've got the starchy endosperm, which is kind of that inner light tan that you're seeing there on your screen. And this is where all of our carbohydrates are. And then we've got the germ, which is higher in fat and vitamin E and other antioxidants. So the image on the left, that grain has all 3 of those components and all of those nutrients. When a grain is refined or processed and it becomes a white grain, just the endosperm is left. So just that starchy compound. So you're missing out on all of that fiber, those B vitamins, the vitamin E and antioxidants in those whole grains when you're just consuming that starchy core. So the benefits of whole grains, you may be able to think through this given what we just shared on the previous slide of how whole grains are really rich in all these vitamins and fiber. But why fiber is so important? And there's many reasons, and we could have a whole class on fiber. And in our lifestyle medicine, our foundations of lifestyle medicine class, we do have a whole class on fiber. So if you want to deep dive into that, join us in that class series and we will nerd out on fiber with you. But for the sake of tonight's class, you just need to know that fiber can help lower cardiovascular disease risk. There's this long-term study, the Nurses' Health Study, that looks, it's a prospective study, so it looks kind of back in time at what health habits influence disease outcomes. And they found in this study that women who eat 2 to 3 servings of whole grain foods a day have a 30% less likelihood of developing cardiovascular disease compared to women who eat less than 1 serving of whole grains a day. And that is tied to the fiber, particularly the soluble fiber, which helps us mop up cholesterol. So there's a huge cardiovascular benefit to eating fiber, which these whole grain foods contain. Fiber also helps keep us full, which can help us prevent from overeating. So it can help us with weight management. And then fiber feeds our gut bacteria. So it acts as a prebiotic or food for our gut bacteria to help us have a healthy population of the good microbes in our digestive tract. And having a healthy gut is really the foundation of having a healthy brain and good mood, because most of our serotonin production actually happens in our digestive tract. And you may remember serotonin is one of those feel-good brain chemicals, and we think of it like happening in our brain, and there are receptors there, but a lot of that production actually happens in our gut when our good gut bacteria ferment and create short chain fatty acids. Those aid in the production of serotonin. Okay, and then everybody's favorite thing to talk about with fiber, good poops. Fiber keeps you regular, so it keeps your bowels functioning properly, and who doesn't love that? Whole grains also help with good blood sugar control, and that's due to the fiber, like we were talking about, that starchy endosperm in our processed and refined grains breaks down into sugar really, really quickly. But when we have that starchy endosperm packaged with that bran and the germ, the rate of breakdown in our digestive tract is much slower, and we get this more sustained release of glucose. So we don't get as high of spikes in blood sugar, and our body doesn't have to work as hard to process that and get it into our cells. Whole grains also contain magnesium, which sensitizes our cells to insulin, which is what helps pull glucose into our cells. So hopefully you're already seeing that whole grains are a powerhouse for our bodies. And in addition to that, there are some anti-cancer compounds like phytic acid, which have been connected to reduction of risk for cancers, particularly colon cancer. So this slide just shows a quick run through of some different types of whole grains, and we're going to talk through some of these in a few minutes. This is not a completely exhaustive list, just a list to get you started. And on our class resource website, which I will link to again at the end of this class and in our class follow-up email, we have this list in our Whole Grains 101 handout, so you can reference it there, so don't worry about writing this down. Anything that you see on the screen here that has an asterisk next to it is naturally gluten-free. So if you're avoiding gluten for whatever reason that might be, those are the grains that you're going to want to focus on. All right, so if you're at the grocery store and you're wondering, how do I find whole grains beyond the ones that are in their full form, like what we're going to talk about in our show and tell, what do you want to look out for? So first and foremost, you want to look for the ingredients list. So if you look on your slide here, you've got a list of words. That is the ingredients list. It usually falls underneath the nutrition facts panel. Ingredients are listed in order of most to least by weight. So we want to see whole, 100% whole, whole grain, stone ground in those first 1 or 2 words. That helps cue us that, oh, okay, this is a whole grain food. The second clue is to look for the words enriched, refined, degerminated, which is often used in association with cornmeal. And if you see any of those words in your ingredients list, you know, aha, this is probably not a whole grain food. Okay. And then another great place to look is the fiber content. So for bread, like we're using in this example here, you want to have about 3 grams of fiber per slice. And only our whole grain options typically have that amount of fiber. And brown doesn't automatically equal whole grain, so it can be a helpful cue to maybe get you started, but you definitely want to look at the ingredients list and that fiber content to make sure that it truly is a whole grain food. And sometimes fiber can be added in with something maybe like inulin or psyllium husk or things like that. So make sure that even if those ingredients still exist in this food that you're eating, that the first one or two ingredients still are a whole grain, blank, insert whatever grain that is. All right, so now I'm going to turn off my slideshow here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and focus on this cutting board right here. So hopefully everybody can see this cutting board with all these beautiful glass bowls. Just want to go through a quick whole grain show and tell here. So our first little bowl here, this is quinoa. So this is a grain that people really like because it's higher in protein. So you get about 8 grams of protein per cooked cup of quinoa. It's also really high in an amino acid called lysine, which is something that a lot of other grains are lacking in. So great to have quinoa on board. When you're preparing it, you want to rinse it before you cook it, because there are these things called saponins, which add a little bit of a bitter taste, and sometimes it can upset some people's stomachs. So if you just rinse the quinoa before you cook it, it gets rid of those saponins, and then you're good to go. You cook it 2-to-1 ratio of water or broth to grain. Next, we've got rolled oats right here. So oats are basically the oat groat or grain that have been steamed and then rolled through. They have to take a couple stainless steel rollers and flatten it down. So that process decreases the cooking time a little bit, but it's still a whole grain. Okay. Oats cook in about 10 minutes. So you may be familiar with this as a great breakfast option. We're going to do some recipes in later classes, like for a baked oatmeal that's particularly yummy. So that's a great application for it. Steel cut oats are an even less processed version of oats. It's basically just that oat groat that has been chopped up into tiny little pieces. So there's no steaming, there's no heat involved. It's just the physical chopping of that oat groat, which creates more surface area for water to get in, and then does decrease the cooking time a little bit from the whole oat groat stage, but these are longer cook. The steel cut oats, you're going to do about 3 parts of liquid to 1 part of grain, and they take anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes to cook. These are a great Instapot thing or slow cooker thing as well, if that is too much time for you. They're a little bit chewier too than our regular rolled oats. So depending on your texture preferences, that may be something you like or maybe something you don't like. Next, we've got millet, which is this kind of yellowy grain here. You may have seen this in birdseed. Yes, it is there. And I know people joke about eating bird food with our grains and vegetables. And I'm okay with that because this is really tasty. And we're going to make a really tasty recipe that is going to make you think twice about adding millet to your plate. So this is a grain that is found commonly in the continent of Africa and Asia. It's a staple grain in both of those continents. It's really drought resistant, which is part of its widespread use in all of those areas. It is a little bit on the drier side when you cook it, so it's really good for making into porridges or using with sauces. Next, we've got buckwheat, which is one of my favorite grains because of the shape. It's this little triangle. I don't know if you can see that really well. Let's see. Go over here. Maybe not too much. If you can see, it's a little triangle, which is very fun. And even though buckwheat has wheat in the name, has no relation to the wheat family or any gluten-containing grains. So if you are gluten-free, you can still eat the buckwheat safely. Okay, buckwheat also cooks really quickly in about 15 minutes, and you use about a 2-to-1 ratio of liquid to grain. This right here, this kind of grayish, grassy looking grain is the Newman or you may have heard it referred to as wild rice. This is a really important staple food crop for indigenous communities in the Great Lakes region. And you may have seen wild rice in the grocery store that's really dark black. That is cultivated wild rice. There's a difference between wild harvested and cultivated wild rice. The cultivated rice is really not wild, and it takes a really long time to cook, about 40 to 50 minutes, whereas this rice here, and it's gray and kind of a grassy green color. This is hand harvested and wood parched, and it cooks in about 15 minutes. And purchasing this rice, typically, if your bag says wild harvested, that's how you know it's this kind of rice. Typically, purchasing that kind of rice, you're supporting indigenous communities and their food sovereignty work. So I highly recommend, if you've never had the real deal, look for that in your grocery store. And in my follow-up email, I'll send a link to an organization that sells the wild rice. This next grain right here, it looks a little bit like sand. This is fonio. It's another grain that is really common in the western part of the African continent because, again, it's really highly drought resistant. It cooks in 5 minutes and it expands 4 times. So you can put a quarter cup in your pan and you get a whole cup of fonio. I've really enjoyed it as a breakfast porridge. It kind of has a cream of wheat-like consistency. So that's a really great option if you're looking to change it up from your oatmeal. Right here, we've got some black rice, also called forbidden rice. This is a really nice alternative to your white rice and even your brown rice. It's got more protein and fiber than brown rice. And this black purple color means that it has a lot of anthocyanins, which are antioxidants that are particularly helpful for cognitive health and function. It's got a little bit chewier texture than your white rice or even your brown rice. So it's got more tooth to it, which I really enjoy. And it's just really pretty in your bowl. And then we have here, moving around, we've got some wheat berries. So this is what wheat looks like before it's ground into flour. And you can actually cook these whole grains and make them into a really nice salad. They're a little bit nutty and sweet. So they're good mixed with, I've had them in like a kale and squash salad with some dried cranberries. Really nice there. You could put them in a soup. So those are really nice to add to your plate. And then last but not least, we have some stone ground grits. So we get some questions about whether grits are a whole grain or not. And the instant and the regular grits that you see in the grocery store are not. So look for stone ground grits in your grocery store. Those are a whole grain because just the whole corn kernel that has been ground between 2 big pieces of stone to get these kind of cracked corn kernels. This, if you're not familiar with grits, they're fabulous in both savory and sweet applications. There may be some controversy around that, depending on who you talk to. I'm a huge savory grit fan, but again, a really great breakfast porridge type option. And then the leftover cooked grits you can make into little polenta cakes the next day. So fun. I think maybe there was a question about grains. Was there a question?
Yes, it was.
I'm gonna. What would?
Are bulgur and farro also whole grains?
Yeah, great question. The question was, are bulgur and farro also whole grains? And yes, both of those are also. Bulgur is cracked wheat, and farro is a type of wheat as well, which that you can use kind of interchangeably to how you would use wheat berries. So both of those are still whole grains. All right, so I am going to change things up a little bit. We're going to change our camera view so we can get cooking and you can see these whole grains in action. And these recipes are all on the cooking site. So again, you will get an email post class with that link. So if you haven't bookmarked it, you can go back and reference those there. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my skillet here so that starts getting warm. What? Oh, good question. We have another question about where you can find these grains. And I really appreciate that because I meant to mention that. So thank you for queuing that up for me. You can find these grains in the grocery store, typically by the dry beans. That's where I often find them in like a Meijer or a Kroger. Or if your grocery store has a bulk food section, you're usually going to find a greater diversity of grains in that section. Your oats and your grits are going to be in the cereal aisle typically. If you have a co-op or a health food store in your community, that's also usually a great place to buy whole grains. Like here in Ypsilanti, we've got the Ypsi Food Co-op. I get a lot of my grains there because they're cheaper in bulk, and they tend to have a wider selection than my normal grocery store does. So great question. Thank you for that. All right, our very first recipe, we are going to make a millet and peanut pilaf. This is a recipe that is loosely adapted from Bryant Terry's Afro Vegan Soul Cookbook. Great cookbook. Highly recommend that. If you like tonight's recipe, check it out. He pairs music with all of his recipes, so it makes for a really fun cook-along experience. All right, so I'm going to start by showing y'all how we're going to prep this pepper. So to cut a pepper, you're going to take your chef's knife. And if you remember from our previous class, see, let me hold it. There you go. You can see that better now. Okay. You're going to pinch between your thumb and your first finger, wrap your 3 fingers around the blade. Okay. That's going to give you that sturdy grip. It's going to protect your wrist from getting fatigued, and it's going to give you more leverage. Okay. You're going to take your other hand and you're going to make a claw, right, to hold the pepper on the cutting board. You're going to slice down the end off. Okay. And you're turning it around and you're going to slice the top off. And then you can, we're trying to get rid of this pithy part in the seeds without getting the seeds everywhere. So I'm just going to go around. And there's lots of different ways to cut a pepper. This is not the only way. It's just the way that I like, works well for me. So I'm going to stack these 2 sections together, and I'm making thin strips because my goal here is to get these into a dice. And dicing means I'm trying to get these into uniform little squares. Okay. And you don't have to be perfect. We just want to roughly get them to the same size because then they're going to cook at roughly the same time, and we won't have to be standing around waiting. Okay, so we've got that. I'm going to get some oil in my pan here. I've got 2 tablespoons of olive oil that are going into our skillet. If you are looking to avoid oil, you can totally just use 3 tablespoons of water in here and do a water saute. Okay, totally reasonable. I'm going to add in my pepper. So this was 1 really small pepper, or the recipe calls for about ½ a cup of diced peppers, right? We've got some diced red onion. This is ½ a cup. It's about half of a small red onion. This red onion is adding some quercetin, which is a really potent phyto or plant nutrient that's helpful for DNA repair. We've got some organosulfur compounds from our onions that are helpful for detoxification. And then that purple color is giving us more of those anthocyanins. I'm having a hard time pronouncing words tonight, so bear with me. I apologize. That are helping protect our brain and our cognitive function. So we're going to give that a stir. Going to add in some garlic. So this is 1 clove of minced garlic. And when you're using garlic, I want you to mince this first and let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes before you cook it and use it in your recipe. Because as you let the garlic sit out, there's some enzymes that are interacting with the oxygen, and they're producing this compound called allicin that is one of the health promoting components of garlic. Okay, and we don't get that formation when we just cut it and throw it right into our dish. So let it sit. All right, so we're gonna let this cook for a few minutes here until these get soft. So I'm just looking for the peppers to get soft. I'm going to turn my heat up. I've got it on medium high heat. So I'm using an induction burner. This is about 1,000. Right. And I'm using olive oil because I'm not using super high heat in this application. You could also use avocado oil that has a higher smoke point. So that would be another totally fine oil in this application. All right, these are looking pretty good. It's really fragrant. I always wish somebody out there who is more technologically advanced than me, you need to invent like smell-o-vision so that I can pipe all these smells to you, because I think it would make you even more excited about these recipes that we're making. The garlic and the onion smell really darn good. All right, so next we are going to add some peanuts. So we've got a half a cup of dry roasted peanuts. These, we want the dry roasted, no salt added. We're going to add our own salt so we can control the quantity of salt that goes into this dish. The dry roasted, so we're not getting any unhealthful oils in here. And we're just going to get a better flavor from these. Okay, so, and if you have a peanut or a nut allergy, just skip these. I've made it full with and without. It's just as lovely. You could sub in another nut or seed if you wanted to. Maybe some pumpkin seeds or sunflower seeds. Probably the sunflower seeds, I would think. All right, so we're just going to put these in here and let them go for about a minute. Just want to get them warmed. Don't want to brown them or overcook them. And then next we're going to add, this is what 1 cup of dry millet makes. So this was 1 cup of dried millet that was cooked with 2 cups of water, covered for about 20 minutes. And then we let it sit aside and kind of steam for about 15 minutes. So you can see, can I have that millet bowl? I just want to show you the difference between the two. So this is the millet uncooked and the millet cooked. So you can kind of see the difference. Lighter, fluffier, still kind of yellow, but has expanded in size. So we're going to add all of that. So when you're making this recipe at home, you want to make the millet before you start cooking these veggies. And the recipe will tell you that, but just to call that out. All right. So I'm going to add that in here. Just going to break up these clumps a little bit. Evenly mix it throughout our veggies. Okay, and now we've got some cherry tomatoes that we're going to add. You could use any tomatoes if you don't have cherry tomatoes. This is just about 2/3 of a 10-ounce package of cherry tomatoes that I sliced into quarters. Okay, you're going for about 3/4 of a cup of tomatoes. So if you are using another kind of tomato, that's kind of what you want to go for. I just chose to use the cherry tomatoes because they're a little bit on the sweeter side, and the package at the grocery store came in multiple colors, and I thought it was fun to add some more of those rainbow of colors to our dish, because we do eat with our eyes too. So making our food visually appealing is just as important as making it nourishing for our bodies and tasty for our tongues. So, all right, we've got our tomatoes in there. Next, I'm going to add a tablespoon of our coconut aminos. If you've been with us before for these classes, you know that our coconut aminos are a soy sauce alternative. So they're lower in sodium than soy sauce, and they're a little bit on the sweet side. This is also a good gluten-free soy sauce option for folks. We've got a tablespoon of chili powder. It's going in here. And a tablespoon, I'm sorry, that was a tablespoon of paprika, smoked paprika, and a tablespoon of chili powder. The smoked paprika is, it's a ground dried pepper, typically a Hungarian pepper. That paprika is really good if you're somebody who likes the flavor of smoked meats in your dishes. Like you're someone who cooks, say, like collard greens with a ham hock, typically, you can sub in for that ham hock some smoked paprika, and you get some of those same smoky flavors without having that animal protein in there. Another fun thing. Paprika is kind of, I think, underutilized and underappreciated in our cooking. One of my favorites. All right, and then we got a couple tablespoons of lemon juice. Add that in here. Give that a stir. And so making sure that everything is mixed together. Our spices are evenly distributed. And the millet is mixed thoroughly. The millet clumps a little bit, so you just want to make sure that you're mixing it well throughout here. Okay, and that's it. There we go. There is our millet pilaf. You can eat this as a side, just like this. It's perfectly tasty. In Bryant Terry's book, that Afro Vegan Soul, he uses this to then stuff some avocados. So that's also a really delicious way to eat this. Or you could throw a can of chickpeas in here or your favorite bean, top it with some tempeh, and you've got almost a complete meal. Okay, so I'm going to take this off and pass it to my friends. And this is beeping at me because I took away the skillet. Thank you, Lauren. We're going to put another skillet on because our next recipe is a buckwheat pilaf. So this is another recipe that you can add beans or tempeh to make it a complete meal. We're just going to focus on the grains tonight. We're going to start by cutting an onion because we haven't done that yet in class, and I want to show you how I like to do that. So I like to start by placing the root end, which is where these little hairy bits are, down on the cutting board, gripping my knife. I'm going to get rid of my little pepper bits here. Gripping the knife like I showed you, my thumb and my forefinger, wrapping my hands around the blade, and then slicing from the stem side, which is where this like papery point is. That's the stem side. Using the tip of my knife to kind of slice through the center of that onion. Okay, and then I'm going to peel off this papery outer layer and probably the next layer underneath. I don't want that. It'll be kind of bitter and have a funky texture in my dish. So we're just going to get rid of those. Do that for both sides here. Okay, so then what we're going to do is I'm going to trim off this stem end. There's a little more little papery bits. Just want to get rid of those. And then on your onion, you can see, hopefully you can see, yeah, there's these little veins, these little lines. Okay, you can use those as guidelines for cutting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tip of my knife and I'm going to slice around the onion, kind of following those guidelines. And that's going to give me evenly spaced cuts because, again, we're dicing here and I want these pieces to be about the same size. And you may notice I'm not cutting all the way through to the root end so that those slices are staying together. Just makes it a little bit easier to cut. And now I'm going to go the opposite direction. Okay, and I've got these beautifully, fairly evenly sized pieces. And then when you get to your root end, you can just quick turn it around, throw it off to the side, and there you go. And we are going to turn on our skillet, warm that up while we do this second half here. And we're going to slice around, and notice I'm trying to keep my hand in that kind of claw formation. So I'm keeping my fingers away from the knife, but I'm using them to kind of hold and guide that food and push it into the blade of the knife as I'm making my rocking motion. I'm keeping the knife tip down on the cutting board and I'm rocking. I'm not seesawing up and down or sawing. I'm following a rocking motion. All right. Got that. My skillet is feeling pretty warm, so I'm going to add in, we got another couple tablespoons of that olive oil. And again, remember, if you are wanting to avoid the oil, you can totally do a water saute. My eyes are starting to water from the onions. This may happen to you at home too. Some things we can do to help decrease that from happening is using a sharp knife. So it happens, we get that reaction from those organosulfur compounds that are so beneficial for our health. They can irritate our eyes and cause that tearing. And we're more likely to release more of them and cause that eye irritation if we have a dull knife, because we're just kind of smashing the cell walls instead of cleanly slicing through them like we will if we have a sharp knife. So having a really sharp knife can help. Wearing goggles, believe it or not, can help because it keeps those compounds from getting to your eyes. And then if we rinsed our onion under some water real quick, that would have gotten rid of some of those compounds and decreased the irritation to our eyes, but then we'd be losing out on the good nutrition and health benefits. So you're just going to have to look at me with slightly watery eyes. Take a drink real quick. All right. So next we've got some button mushrooms. We're going to add those in a second once our onions start becoming a little bit more translucent. Wipe away my tears here. All right, so this is a 16-ounce package of button mushrooms. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind giving me a tissue, that would be great. I promise I'm not sad about hanging out with you all tonight on Valentine's Day. It's just the onions. Thank you so much. Maybe next time you'll see me in some goggles. We can try that out together, and then you won't have to watch me do this. All right. Thanks for bearing with me. So our button mushrooms, this is a 16-ounce or 1 pound package of white button mushrooms. You could use any kind of mushroom that you wanted. This is just what happens to be most commonly available at the grocery store, so that's what we went with. Just turn down my onions a little bit. All right, and I just want to show you how I cut these. So we just slice these mushrooms. These are kind of big, so I'm going to slice it in half and then turn it the opposite direction. And then I'm just making slices. So mushrooms are full of soluble fiber, beta glucans, which are really helpful for lowering our cholesterol. They also are full of aromatase inhibitors, which you may have heard that term as it relates to breast cancer. So they can help with breast cancer risk reduction. A colleague, we were just reading about it, and regular mushroom consumption can potentially decrease breast cancer risk by about 60%, according to some studies. So these are pretty powerful foods. So this recipe is a really great way to incorporate them into your daily life. We're going to let these cook. I'm going to turn my heat back up until they are soft. I'm going to add a pinch of salt. So it's about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And this is just going to kind of sweat them a little bit, so they're going to cook a little bit faster. Do that. And then while those are cooking down, we're also going to cut a clove of garlic. Now, I didn't cut this ahead of time because I wanted to show you the process for mincing garlic. So we won't get all of the Allison benefits from this, but we're still getting some health benefits, some anti-inflammatory nutrients from the garlic. So you just saw I sliced off the root tip of the garlic while holding the stem tip. I'm going to smash the garlic clove with the fat part of my knife. That helps me peel off the skin much easier. Put that aside. And then I'm going to make thin slices, gather those slices together and go back over them. This is mincing. So mincing, we're getting into finely sliced pieces. So really tiny, much smaller than dicing. And why we want to mince is because garlic is a really strong flavor. And for our strong flavored foods like garlic, ginger, if we use fresh turmeric, some of our herbs and stuff like that, we want them to be in small pieces so they evenly distribute throughout our dish and we get that flavor punch in every bite, not just in a few. All right, I'm gonna give my onions and mushrooms a little stir here. Okay, you can see the mushrooms are kind of starting to brown a little bit. They're getting softer. They're decreasing in size. That's what we want. All right. So got this garlic minced. And we're now going to put it into our pan here. And you may have noticed that I'm gathering it with the non-blade side of the knife. If we scrape the blade across our cutting board, that dulls our knives faster. So always, if you're going to scrape off your cutting board with your knife, use the non-cutting side. All right, let's give this a stir. Looking pretty good. Looking pretty good. Okay. Now we're going to work with our kale. So this is a bunch of purple kale. You can use green kale. I think I'm just on a purple kick tonight. We've got our purple rice and our red onion. I saw this purple kale and thought it'd be a pretty fun color addition. And again, you're getting those anthocyanins. So put this in our dish. What we're going to do is de-stem it. You can do that by holding the non-leafy part of the stem in one hand, taking your thumb and your pointer finger on just below that and kind of pulling down the stem to strip the leaf off. Okay, so I've got the leafy bits and I've got the stem bits. You can also just rip if that feels easier to you and your comfort level. So I'm going to pull off. I think I'm kind of doing a combination of both because these stems are a little bit tough. Okay, and I'm just basically, I want to remove the tough fibrous stems. So I'm just left with the tender leafy bits. There. All right. And then I'm just going to gather all my leaves together in this little pile. Okay. And I am going to slice thin slices down my bunch. And then I'm going to go the opposite direction a couple times to break these up into bite-sized pieces. Again, you could totally rip up all that kale by hand if you wanted to. Our kale is in our pan now. And we're just going to give that a stir. Let that wilt down a little bit for a few minutes. Our kale is adding some good magnesium and fiber to our dish. Leafy greens, I know that this is purple, but as you see it cook, you might be seeing some of that green start to appear. Our leafy greens are also a really good source of folate, which is really important during pregnancy for fetal development. Also really important for our DNA repair processes. So greens are great folate source. All right, we're gonna let that cook for a couple minutes. Well, actually, it's looking pretty good because we've got this on high heat. So I think what we're gonna do is add in our buckwheat, which this is what that buckwheat looks like when it's cooked. So it also too has kind of a purpley hue to it. This cooked in about 15 minutes. Thanks, Lauren. So you can see this is the dried version and this is the cooked version. So we're going to add, this is 1 cup of cooked buckwheat into our pan here. I'm sorry, what? Oh, someone asked a question about washing the kale first. Yes, I wash pretty much every piece of produce that I get from the grocery store, unless it's like the triple wash packaged salad mix. before cooking. Mushrooms, I typically don't wash with water. I'll like take a piece of paper towel and dry them off to get any of the like little soil bits off of them, because when you rinse them underwater, they can absorb that water and then they get kind of mushy when you cook them. But all other produce like the kale, the peppers, everything, I definitely washed before we started using it in class tonight. Highly recommend you do the same, because you don't know who touched it at the grocery store before you bought it. So just good practice. All right, there we have it. This is our dish, our buckwheat pilaf with mushrooms and kale. Again, you can add chickpeas to this, add some tempeh to it. You've got a full meal with your whole grain, your veggies, and your protein source right there. One other thing to note about the buckwheat is high in an antioxidant called rutin. So you're getting, again, some anti-inflammatory from the whole grain, from the mushrooms, from the garlic and the onion. So really, really nutrient dense, powerful meal. All right, we are done with the skillet and this hot plate. So I'm going to move that out of the way and move on to our final recipe, which we've got 9 minutes to do, and I think we can make it happen. All right. Our very last recipe is a tabbouleh, which is a Middle Eastern salad. It uses a lot of parsley and mint. It's very flavorful, and it's a cold dish. And we are going to use quinoa as our grain. You may see it with bulgur. Somebody asked a question about whether bulgur was a whole grain, and yes, it is. That is more commonly the grain that you will see in tabbouleh, but you can use quinoa, you can use millet, you can use a whole variety of different grains. So we're going to make a dressing for our tabbouleh. This is a 1/3 cup of olive oil. Got a couple tablespoons of lemon juice. Okay, and we've got some ground coriander, a 1/4 teaspoon of that. We've got a 1/4 teaspoon of minced garlic, which, a 1/4 teaspoon of dried garlic, which is equivalent to a clove of fresh minced garlic. You could do whatever you wanted. I was just trying to keep it simple here for this recipe. And then we've got a pinch of cinnamon. And I'm going to do about 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And again, you can totally omit the salt if you want to. So I'm just mixing this together to emulsify those ingredients that we're going to pour this over once we get everything prepared. So I've got about 2 bunches of parsley that were chopped. Those are going to go into our bowl here. I'm going to show you what that preparation looks like. So to do our parsley, I already trimmed off the stems. So you want to trim off the majority of the stems where there aren't any leaves. So we're really just going to go in for the leaves. I'm going to roll this up, chop it in half, gather that back together, and I'm going to rack back and forth in thin slices. Oh, Laura, can you mute yourself? And gather this back together. So parsley is a really potent source of apigenin, which is another one of those phytonutrients that is a true anti-inflammatory workhorse. It actually kind of turns off some of those inflammation pathways in our body. So this is another great anti-inflammatory dish. And if you haven't picked up on it by now, I'm saying anti-inflammatory a lot. So people ask us, about the anti-inflammatory diet and what's the best for disease prevention, which, a lot of diseases are rooted in inflammation. Plant foods, eating plant foods is anti-inflammatory. A lot of these plant foods that we're going to be talking about in these classes have really potent anti-inflammatory properties. All right, our parsley is going into our bowl. We have got a cup of sliced English cucumbers. We're doing the English cucumber because it's got a thinner skin that isn't as bitter as our other types of cucumbers. We've got 2 scallions that have been thinly sliced. Those are going in here. And then we're going to do a cup of tomatoes. So I've got Roma tomatoes because they've got thicker walls. So there's more like meat and flesh to them and less juice. So we're just getting the meaty bits of the tomato. I want to core them and get the stem part out. So I'm using my handy dandy paring knife, which we talked about in our very first class. I'm going to take that tip of the knife, stick it in around that stem end, which is where that tough kind of core is, and just twist around, pop up, and there we go. I've got the core out of the tomato. Okay, I'm going to do that for probably about 2 of these. And then you can use your chef's knife if you have a sharp chef knife, but I also wanted to show you the other knife that we talked about, which is our serrated knife. So it's got that sawtooth edge, really helpful for cutting through thin tomato skins. I'm just going to make a couple slices here. In here. And I'm just rough chopping these to get them into kind of big pieces. That looks good to me. Side, tomato in here. And then last but not least, we need about a 1/3 cup. Well, actually not last but not least, or second to last. We need about a 1/3 cup of mint leaves. So these have been picked off the stem because we just want the leaves. I'm going to gather them into a stack or a pile, roll them as tightly as I can, and then I'm going to thinly slice with the tip of my knife on the cutting board. I'm going to thinly slice. And this thinly slicing into ribbons, you may have seen in recipes the term chiffonade. That's what this means. It's just a fancy way of saying slice into little thin ribbons. Okay, so I'm going to go back over those little thin ribbons so we get kind of some fine pieces here. Okay, and this goes into the bowl. We add in, this is 1 cup of quinoa that was cooked. We're going to add in about half of that to our here. And then we are going to add in our dressing. Give it 1 more stir before we toss it in here. Give this a quick little stir. And there you go. We have got quinoa tabbouleh. And you can have this on the side with some hummus and maybe some falafel if you want to be totally Mediterranean. It's also great with some chickpeas thrown into it and some tempeh, like any of these other recipes we've shared tonight. This recipe will get stuck in your teeth, the parsley and the mint. So make sure you eat this with a friend who you trust, who will tell you when you have food stuck in your teeth. This is a great party food as well. It makes a lot and comes together pretty quick, as you may have noticed. So those are all of our recipes for tonight. Again, those are going to be online in the class website. So if you haven't already seen them, they will be there. This is a QR code. So if you have a smartphone and you hold it up to that QR code, you open up your photo app and you hold it up to that QR code, it's going to take you directly to that website with all the recipes. That's where the recipes for every class are going to be. So bookmark that. And then if you don't have a smartphone, that website right there is where you're going to go. So sites.google.com/view cooking W plants \home. Okay, so I'm going to give you a second to write that down if you don't have that smartphone. And again, this will be in the follow-up email, so you can access it there as well. And then I mentioned earlier in class that we do have a Foundations of Lifestyle Medicine class series. So if you are interested in learning about fiber and taking that deep dive with our colleagues Laura and Emily, or you're interested in understanding the principles behind obtaining restorative sleep or any of these other pillars, this is a great class for you. We dive into the science in each of the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, including nutrition, and give you practical skills for applying that science into your everyday life. So if that's something that you're interested in learning more about, email us lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org, and we'll be happy to give you more information about it. With that, I think we are right on time to wrap up class. I really appreciate you all taking some time this Wednesday evening, this Valentine's Wednesday evening, and spending time with me, learning about whole grains. Hopefully you're feeling excited to try these recipes that may have some new flavors. If you do try them, email us, let me know. I would love to see a picture and hear what you think. Take good care, everybody. Have a good night, and we'll see you next month.